as soon as something goes wrong, you want to receive an email, right? But also you have other engineers that they are working on the product, right? So you have an engineer that, for example, over the night or I don't know, weekend or early morning when they go back to work, they want to quickly check the pipeline. Is everything working fine or not? Right? So our goal is that to create a dashboard, like an API, is not a dashboard, it's an API that simply shows if the current status of the pipeline is it successful, is it running, or is it failing? Right? That means that again, you as a manager, you will receive an email for notification, but someone else that they don't receive the notification, when they go to work, they want to open a page, says that everything working, yes or no, right? So the second DAG, the goal here is that is going to create an API. That API, we want to connect it to the previous DAG to listen to the status of the previous DAG. If the status of the previous DAG was success, when user goes to this API, it reroutes to a page that says successful. If the status of the previous DAG was failure, if user goes here, it reroutes to a page that shows failure, right? And you can make that page however you want, make it pretty or whatever, right? But for the sake of this class, I just wanted to just put two separate pages. Is that clear what we wanted so far, right? Okay, so the first thing, I'm just going to quickly go to this. So for some of you that maybe haven't worked on it. So in order to make this email configuration, yeah. So as you know, Airflow has again that file airflow.cfg, which almost every details is that for your Airflow, how to run, security question, everything is there, right? So if you open that file and you scroll down, there is a part called SMTP, right? And there's a series of, these are exactly what you see: SMTP host, SMTP start, SSL user, password port, right? So by default, it's empty. There's no values in front of it. Depending on what is your email, on what server your email is sitting, you need to basically change that. So for Google, for example, SMTP host, you will use smtp.gmail.com, right? So the goal here, what we're trying to do is to connect your Gmail to Airflow. So when something happens, Airflow doesn't want to send an email to you. Airflow uses basically your own email to send an email to yourself, right? There's no cost for them that. So you need to allow Airflow to connect to your email by providing your password. But you don't provide your actual password. You need to create an API password, or basically a program password on Gmail. And this page again was here. If you go on it, it tells you that how to create a sign up password. Just follow this instruction. You get a 12-digit token, basically. After you got that tokens, basically you need to here SMTP password, enter that token here. That basically that allows to Airflow to connect to your Gmail. And then after that, some of this start depending on the server that you're using. For Google, by default, this one is blue and this one is green, right? I don't know if you're doing Outlook, Yahoo, or stuff like that. I don't know what's the top to do. Or if you work in a company, you have a totally different server. You have someone in the IT that they help you with this information. There's a port here to 587. Add user, SMTP user, and SMTP mail from is going to be your same email address, right? So user is to connect to Google, Gmail. Mail from is that to send an email from this one. So email is send an email from yourself to yourself, right? So there's a timeout and there is a try. That means if something happened, network issue going to stop, how many times you try and what's the timeout? You know, when you want to do a post, there's a time period that you can wait for the response. If there's no response after 30 seconds, for example, you can basically go to the next retry. So that's the ideas of the SMTP connecting the email. Okay. Now, when we so previous class we work with a Python operator as part of the DAG that we have. In today's class, we need to work with two other things. One is the bash operator, and the other one is email operator, right? So email operator, it's for this email part, to send an email. Because again, remember, Airflow has these operators. For example, Python operator, that means I want to run a Python function. So you need to run it using what? Using Python. So you have Python. If you're running the dust.sh or bash file, you need to use bash operator. If you want to open an email and send an email, you use email operator using. It's kind of like a straightforward, right? And then there is this function, trigger DAG run operator. So that is for this arrow that I create here. So as the name comes, trigger DAG run operator. That means to trigger another DAG to run, right? So we want, as soon as this one finished successfully, to send this trigger order to this one. Hey, this DAG, run it, basically. So in order to do that, we will use trigger DAG run operator. Okay? Is that clear? And in the second Airflow, just to quickly tell you what we're going to do in it, we will have a function to check DAG status. That means it will check this one, the status of the whole DAG. Because a DAG, as soon as it reaches to the end, it has a status. Or you can always check. Was it successful? Was it not successful? Failure. So you check for that. If it's successful, I want to go to a different page. If it's failure, I want to go to a different page. And then the rest of those are just for API. We will go over those. All right. So now let's do. Let's do here. So these files are the same from the previous DAG, the one in the SRC. We don't work with that. I don't know in the MLOps repo what's the name of this file. Is it the same name? Are they different? Flask API. Yeah, okay, so I have mine in, these are the same thing. So the one that says main lab 1 is from the previous lab, and anything that says lab 2 is the Flask API and the main.
So the policy does not have to I found it online, so it was
yeah, I can add it to the repo also. That's good point. I didn't know it's not there. Thank you. I'll add it. Yeah, I'll do that. It's actually really difficult to post this lab because there are lots of dependencies. Some of the files, like environmental files, are large. I cannot push to GitHub. So that's why we try to have as much as possible README, so that you go through that. But there always something comes up. But we'll do that. I'll do that. So let's go here, main lab 2. So ignore those errors. It's just, I'm not loaded in the environment, so it doesn't know those libraries. So the libraries, the functions that we're going to work is Python operator, bash operator, email operator, trigger DAG run operator, and trigger rule. So again, the same thing. We basically set the enable X from pickles in order to between two operations share the data as a pickle format. So starting from here, I will create a function called notify success. That the ideas of this function is that if it was successful, you want to create an email as a successful email. So you need to basically separate them. Successful email function on basically failure email one. So this one, in order to do that, we create a function and it has something to do, it's called context. Context could be a group of information that you receive, basically. That's the context, right? Actually, we don't have context for that. In general, context means grouping of index and model or group of index and basically objects. That becomes the context in terms of machine learning or AI systems. So here, when we say context, you receive one object. That object is actually a group of every group is a group of everything that was run or collected within this run. And when you pass the context, you allow this function to pick whatever is necessary from that basically context. Okay. So we want to in this function, we create something called success email. Is an email operator. That means we want to use this as to send an email. We give the task ID success email. We will send this to this email. Okay. Subject, you just give it a subject and HTML content. So you can use that HTML content, or sometimes, for example, you might have a larger HTML. So you load the file somewhere else. You just open the file, but so for this example, we're just going to send out a simple example. And from this context, we will basically pick the DAG and we assign it as a DAG. So DAG is whatever the DAG we have in this file, right? So that's going to be this success email. We want to do the same thing for failure. You basically repeat the same thing. You're just going to call it failure email and then failure notification, and basically it's HTML content. It's just going to be a failure basically message, right? So these two, so far, they are the same. They don't know anything about failure or success. We will use them as failure or success later, okay? Because so far, these are just two functions. There's no concept of failure. We give them name as failure, name as success, but they're the same function. So the next thing we do, we create the main DAG file. Give it a basically lab name, default arguments, give it some description, a schedule interval. So I actually for the purpose of the lab, I'm going to. I'm not wrong. I want to run it every minute to run the pipeline and create an email and create an update the API. So if you put this becomes every minute, if it was just one, becomes every hour, basically, right? So, and then catch a false tags, some tags again. Remember this tag is in order to search for it. If you want to search through Airflow using the tags, it makes it easier. Like for example, you have so many tags, and you're like, I just want to quickly see anything related to our classification model. So you give this tag classification, right? And this is a new thing that I wanted to add here, owner link. Okay, so this allows you to, on the Airflow dashboard, to later see that in front of every DAG will show the owner name. And if user clicks on the owner name, it will go to the page belonging to the owner name. So imagine you work in a company and you want to be sure that everyone that wants to have a question, is going to click on you, connects you either to your email or connects it to your web page or whatever, right? So you basically put your email or your website or whatever is here, right? So that's owner links. Now, I need to owner links just creates the link. I want to create that action when they click on the owner to redirect to the different web. So this was just the link. I want to create an action basically. So in order to do that, I will use bash operator. Okay. This bash operator basically, I give them a task using link owner. Okay. Bash command is equals owner. It just basically says that owner is actually this one. Sorry, this one just says equals owner. Owner is Rami Mohammed. It's just basically kind of like a printout equals, right? So that's the bash owner task. Then let's go here now. So above we created two email functions, success and failure. Now we want to actually connect those two to the email, like as the full process of the email, like operator. So we will create an email operator. Okay, it's not a function, it's just a task. Email operator. Within that, we give it a task name, email subject, HTML content. So the HTML content, it says that this is a notification email sent from failure. Right? So this doesn't tell you if it's a failure or success. This is a when the process starts, it sends out an email, for example, says that, hey, this is a message comes from Air. It doesn't tell you success or failure. But we also want to say that what happens if the task fails, or what happened if the task was succeed. So it has two variables, or the two promises basically. On failure callback, on success callback. So here we use those two functions that we created above. For failure, we give this notify failure function, and for success, we basically give the notify success function. Okay, now this is the main task basically that you want to use as part of your chain rule or the DAG basically at the end. Then we go here. So this is part is kind of similar from what we did previously. So the idea was that we want a Python operator to load the data. There was a function from in the other file, right, to load the data. So this is the same thing. The second one is for data pre-processing, also the same thing. We load the data using this function. We know this function will get input from the previous one. That's why we have operational arguments, load data task, which is this one, dot output. So the output of that one will go here, right? Then we had this function that allows us to unpickle basically the data and split the data into train and test and learn, right? So this separate data outputs, okay? In the previous class, we went through it. And then we pass that to this task, Python operator. Then we will pass the output of this one to the next task, which was to develop a model. So that function, this function build model, gets the train test data, gets a name for the model to save it as, and you basically save the model as that name. Then we had another task was that to load the model back again and get the test data and test it against that one, right? So that was the idea, similar to what we had in the previous class. Now, we want to add one additional basically task. That task is the trigger to run the second DAG. We want to be sure at the end of this, if it was successful, send the trigger to this one. Hey, start the DAG, right? So we created a task trigger DAG operator. The name of it should be here. I used the last name here. So this one is going to be it has its own operator, which is trigger DAG operator, right? So this one, you give the current DAG to it. This is the current DAG, but it also after you pass it, you also need to give name of the next DAG that you want to run. Okay. So it's important to remember Airflow, when it goes over a folder, any file that is a DAG file, we will recognize it by default, right? So the second file is also should have a main DAG or a DAG object, right? And the main DAG also has a name. The name that I gave it to it is Airflow Lab 2 Flask. So I picked the same name here, passing it to the trigger DAG ID. That means that you tell to Airflow, search through all the DAGs that you have in your inventory. If you find this DAG, trigger DAG. That's basically what it's doing. And there's here a trigger rule. Okay. So trigger rule it basically, you are telling that what should be the rule in order to trigger this one. Now, you can have trigger rule all done. You could have trigger rule all passed. So it passed or succeeds. Let me see. All escaped or all success, all done. There are a series of conditions that you can basically use. I think for the moment, I'm just going to do all done. That means everything finished. We don't care about the status of the finish. That's what I assume. It might be only success. Also, I think if it's failure and success, it will all done basically. So so that's the trigger. Now, what we want to do, we want to basically schedule this after each other. We just basically create this chain rule for the DAG. I started first one to be owner task. That means I wanted that click, basically the echo of the name, and then the click to be there, basically. Owner task. Then load data, pre-process the data, separate the data, build and save the model. After the load model task, that means you loaded the model, tested against the test data, I will send an email. Email, by default, will check the status. If it was a failure, it will send out a failure email. If it was success, it will send out a success email. After that, we have the trigger DAG. This one will goes and trigger the next DAG, says, hey, run this DAG now, because the previous one finished, for example. You think it's clear so far?
Can you use multiple rules?
I believe you can, but I don't know if you can do in one. But normally Airflow has things like this that you can provide lists. I haven't done, but we can test it now. So let's do no. It doesn't hurt. It might break, but it doesn't hurt. Okay. So any other question on this one? Right. So now what we want to do is that we want to go to the second DAG Flask. It's DAG Flask, and there are some default arguments. So we want to create a Flask API. So the first thing is that we create the API, like importing the Flask, we create the API. Then I want to have a function. This function, because remember, when you create that API, and you all have seen that the API video, right? The lab. So you normally have a home page on API, and then you can create as many other pages that you want, right? The post page, Google page, and then like that, whatever you want to call, right? So what I want to do is that we want to create an API page that if user wants to see the pipeline, for example, need to do this API page. But this API page, what it does, there are two other pages. There is a success page, and there is a failure. These two pages, they exist, and they have a default formula. What you want to do is that you want to, whenever a user goes to the API page, to check from previous DAG, check the status. If it was successful, you want to redirect to here. If it was failure, you want to redirect it, right? So in order to check the status of the previous DAG, we are going to use this this function from Airflow models.dag1 import dag1 class. So dag1 class allows you to check a specific DAG based on the ID. So what we will do is that we give it a DAG ID. DAG Airflow lab 2 is the name. So look at here. I have two files. Ignore the lab 1. So I have Flask lab 2 and main lab 2. Okay. Within each of these two, there are two main DAG files. So if I go to the previous one, the main DAG file here. What's the DAG ID? Airflow lab 2. So if we want to search for this DAG, you always need to use the main DAG object ID or task ID. Or sorry, ID, not task ID. And here I use that ID and I use this DAG run to find this ID. Okay, so I will say, hey, find this ID, and then here I will check. I'm trying to see that the state, the default value that I'm hoping for is success. So this is kind of like this is a Boolean. You basically say is that I'm looking for success. If it's a success, it's going to be true. If it's a failure, it's going to be false. Then I will check. If DAG runs, if it's true, return true, if otherwise return false, right? I didn't need to necessarily write it. I could just return that also, because it's either true or false, but I just wanted to be like a readable. So that's one thing so far. Now we want to create the pages, the API pages, right? So we will create this route API. This route API, we create a function, whatever you want to call it. That function will call to the function above. The function above either tells you the previous DAG was successful or was failure, right? If it's successful, I want to return, redirect me to this page. If it was failure, redirect me to this page. Correct? So then we create two basically API pages, success and failure, two rows. And for each of these two, success and failure, I basically I put this template. If you go in templates, there's just two templates for success and failure, which all it does basically, it just put a large font success or failure. You know, that's all it does. So the thing about Flask is that if you want to create page, you need to do HTML page for that, right? So normally I didn't write that HTML. I just asked ChatGPT to give me HTML. So, but whatever you want to put over there, you can just do that for your project, basically. So, what happens? Right. So, and then we basically create a function to start the API. And that basically says app.run, I want to run it on that port, on this, sorry, on that IP and on that port. Okay. So that was the API setup. Now we want to create a DAG for this API because remember, the previous DAG, in order to make this connection to this trigger, it needs to see this one as a DAG file, right? And that was the DAG task ID that we searched for. Airflow lab 2 Flask, basically. And then you give it some name. There's no interval, and I give the tag also for searching. That's it. Now, I need to create one task. So the DAG at the end needed the task, right? I want a task to just start the API. Because if I start the API, which is this one, by default now it has all the pages, API pages, racing success and pages, everything is done, right? So I will basically do a Python operator, start Flask app, give it a task ID, and the DAG is going to be this tag, right? And I just have that, only that task at the end. There's no other task, right? There's just one task basically within this DAG file. Is that clear? Yeah. So now the moment. And for some reason, this all of a sudden started. It does that. So, anyway, I ended up running it outside of the Visual Studio for some reason. I was getting an error over there. So, again, you run Airflow with web server, and you also run Airflow scheduler, so it's scheduled. And so sometimes you need to do Airflow DB upgrade. You know, if you have done some changes in your DBs, basically you run that, you know, before you run the Airflow web servers. But now I have basically two pages are running, right? Or one is Airflow web server. The other one, which is the first one, is Airflow web scheduler. Okay, so when you run again the Airflow web server at the beginning, it basically tells you Airflow is running, and if you remember, it basically gives you this this host. It says it's running on this IP, right? So you go on this IP address now. Now I turned off the Airflow Lab 1. So on Airflow Lab 2 and Airflow Lab 2 Flask, right? So first thing you want to know is that Airflow Lab 2 was the one that I introduced the owner, correct? So you see here, all of these files by default had the Airflow as the owner, because the default argument parameter was Airflow. We can change it. You don't need to have that Airflow. You could put the name. But now it introduced this Rami Muhammadi. So if you click, for example, if you click on it, which you set with your own project, it basically takes you to the page, the owner of the basically DAG, you know. So it's something to keep in mind. Now, when it comes to here, scheduler, this one is basically tells you this is scheduled to run every hour. Okay, every hour, every minute. It's run to scheduled to run every minute. As soon as this one finishes, it will run this one, the second one. Now, right now, there is one is running and one is running here. Okay, that means previously, because this runs every minute, this one finished, send the trigger to this one, and now this one is running, right? So, so basically, because I don't want to open my email, but this is what basically I will receive. I will first receive a notification as Gmail. This notification was sent from Airflow, and then I received the second notification, the task was successful, right? So you should receive the same thing exactly as soon as the task succeeds, right? Sorry, I just cannot open the email while recording. So now there's a caveat here. The caveat here is that the second Airflow task or DAG, the Flask, is on a constant run. So it never stops. This one, it stops, runs it, DAG, finishes until the next run, correct? But the API, when it comes up, there is no termination. So you could terminate it. You could, when you create the API, you could define a time period after some time period to stop the run, stop the task, or you can basically leave it like that. But in our example, we are assuming that you are part of the team and you want this API to be running, so we will leave this to run forever. But now let's go here. So Airflow Lab 2, if you go here, which right now there's something is running, we'll put over on the last one. And if you go to graph, so you have this graph. So let me. So this hashtag something, and then look at here. So this one we know is basically just from 2 of them, right? And then you have send email, and this one, the trigger for the next time. Right? Now, here, if you go over the last one, it's not running, it's a schedule. But why? Because the Flask API is running, so it's not finished. So this one cannot trigger that again because it's already running, right? So this, I didn't have time to basically update this, but basically what I need to do is to, for the Flask API, I need to define a time window, right? Or I need to define some sort of rules that while it's running, if you receive a message from previous one, restart it. Okay, so that's why, again, this is on schedule. Okay. Now, if you go back to, let's go here. If you go to Airflow Lab 2 Flask 1, total running, one is running. So it's basically, this is going to run unless I set it to failure, I break it basically. So I can do that. So if I basically click on this, I will do this, set it failure, then it allows the next one to send the message, right? But for now, this is how basically this this works. So it's just, there is only one task here. You know, this task is there is no, you don't see a connection from this one to the previous one. From previous one, you see a connection to this one because there was a task for the trigger, right? So it's you know, it's one way basically. Now, because when we ran this, so if I click on this and scroll up, this basically is telling me that the API is running on this address, right? So I can basically go to this API. API, and it automatically takes me to success page, right? If it was a failure, it would take me to failure page. Now, if I directly here type failure, this is the failure page. If I directly type success, this is success page. But if I put the API, that means the main page, it will only direct you to the page based on what happened, you know, the previous three. So my expectation is that for you as practice for your project, come up with, don't use like me just a success. Just put I don't know, 10 minutes using ChatGPT and create a better HTML, something that it's more readable, something that has more to it. But try to think about how you can actually utilize this as part of your API. Like maybe one of the team members becomes the responsible for the data pipeline. So that person will receive the email with success or failure, or maybe work on the rules that you want. Maybe you don't want to receive email every time. Just maybe you only want to receive email if it was a failure, right? Success doesn't have any meaning, right? Only you want maybe probably receive an email if it was a failure, or if there's something like a delayed, a schedule, you know, or skipped, for example. You know, something was skipped. You want to know why it was skipped, for example, right? So now if I go back here, let's see this one. I would say that mark has failed. So I set that one to fail. Now this one is running. Let's see if this. So now this was, remember, this was a schedule. It now went green. That means this should already started that again, right? So I haven't done that part. I leave it to yourself for your project. Just you need to add a function, a task, or a time window to that task that after it run, either restart or listen to the next previous one. If there's a new upcoming message, restart. If you search on or go down Airflow pages website, you will find rules for that. Okay. Any question on this one? Do you find value for using something in your project? Yeah. All right. Definitely work with it. It's actually it's going to be really helpful for you. Okay. Now let's do. We're going to change our focus to go to. I think I need to release some labs. So on Canvas, I released a folder lab TFDB. It has 3 subfolders on it. If you want to go download that.